So I plan to start my video essay based on what you advise on the how world literature is circulated, and based on the three articles that I've read, because my main my main interest is how world literature to be included in the comparative literature, and should it be included. And I think based on my reading, I wanted world literature to be included in comparative literature because I felt that it is more inclusive, especially to countries like Malaysia, where we have a multiracial country. So that literature works from other races that uses different languages, not just Malay, as the national language, to have a chance to be recognized through the help of translation. So in hopes that when these literary materials they get popular and circulated across the border, they will have a chance to be compared, to be analyzed as comparative literature too. And there's another question that I ponder upon: should comparative literature include more contemporary genre with hybrid concept like graphic novel in its domain? For this, I find it interesting, but I'm not very sure if I want to dive into it, just because I think that it's like a very huge topic to include in the discussion for the video essay. So the three articles that I've chosen are this, and I straight away put them into categories. Um, I've taken out the definition of comparative literature. So it turns out both three articles they uses different definition of comparative literature. The first article using the lens of Anglo-American school. The second one is the Chinese comparative literature, and also the last one using the French school. For the French school, I'm a bit um, confused because it is from an Iran comparative literature, but it is heavily influenced by French school. However, what's different from their comparative literature to the French school is they included to prove that in their comparative literature they want to include how the superiority of I think Islam religion, or how influence of Persian on Europe. So I think that's a little bit different than French school. So I'm not sure whether to consider it as a French school or as Iran comparative literature.
If you go to your thesis statement, the first few minutes of your presentation, I think
Mm-hmm.
that is spot on. That's exactly what your video essay should be about,
Mm-hmm.
where you argue your case for the importance of inclusion of comparative world literature into the discipline of comparative literature, and how you argue for countries such as Malaysia with its different languages that should also be included into the canon of world literature. And by including it into the canon of world literature, it gets to be included into the discipline of comparative literature. So if that is the thesis,
Mm-hmm.
other issues that are not relevant, like the graphic novel, like the
Oh,
Persian influence on European texts, all those are not relevant.
all right.
So stick to your argument of world literature. But but how is world literature defined, and how can that definition of world literature be broadened and in order to incorporate nations that are new in terms of their literary tradition compared to those in the West. That's the focus. Your
Mm,
focus should not divert from your thesis statement. Your
all
thesis
right.
statement is, what is it that you are trying to argue for? Stick to that.
All right.
Anything else that are not relevant, it needs to go to the side. It
All
needs
right.
to be removed. Yeah.
All right. because the articles that I've read, they start off by they didn't really mention not they mention about comparative literature, but they don't give the exact definition of comparative literature. Just I noticed that they use the French schools and the Anglo American schools, but they don't exactly state that, oh, we're using these American schools or French schools. So I just like put the definition based on their words as the definition of comparative literature. So instead of that, should I include like is it the definition of world literature according to them?
Yes.
Okay.
The structure in your course file, if I may draw your attention to that, the structure of the assignment in your course file,
Mm-hmm.
which is your presentation must include definitions, must include the methodology of 20th and 21st century, must include the current state of comparative literature.
Mm.
The that those elements are something you can incorporate into the video essay. You don't need to structure it by going from one topic to another topic and to another topic, you know.
All right.
Uh, um, just can I just share for a second?
Oh, sure. Wait, I stop sharing. All right.
Um, your thesis is the most important. Your thesis statement is the most important. So always remember that.
Okay.
Um, the video essay, it says in your assignment, the
Mm-hmm.
video essay must include
Mm.
these topics or these issues. So in order to review the state of comparative literature, in order to review the state of the discipline of comparative literature, um, the reason you need to be able to make the distinction between the Western school and the Eastern school is because 20th century predominantly comparative literature focused on the Western perspective. Okay. But in the 21st century, the move is to shift perspective to the Eastern universities and to ask the Eastern universities their methodology, their definition, and their perspective of comparative literature. So that's why the ideas for the video essay, the 3 points that I've got here, these
Mm-hmm.
are suggestions.
Okay.
Because no matter what, you have to discuss these topics, these subtopics, in order to answer the question that you're given, the
Mm-hmm.
difference in perspective between the Western school and the Eastern school, in order for you to conduct a review. So you don't worry too much about addressing each of these
Mm-hmm.
as a separate topic.
Oh, I see.
Focus more on the state of the discipline. What is the state of the discipline? And if you want to come at the topic through the discussion of world literature, then you can say how world literature was in the 20th century and how comparative literature used the corpus of world literature for the discipline of comparative literature, and how in the 21st century the corpus of world literature needs to be broadened in order for the discipline of comparative literature to be inclusive of literatures coming from countries such as Malaysia,
Right.
which produces, emerging writers who are up and coming. We have had some award-winning writers, but these are only of recent times, right? Some of our writers have been writing for like a few decades now, but they might not have gotten the recognition at the international level.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean their works cannot be included into the study or into the discipline of comparative literature? So that's what you are suggesting,
Yeah.
right? So stick to that. Don't worry too much about the Anglo school, the French school, Anglo American school, French school. All that will come as you discuss the issue. Because obviously, in your discussion, you will have to show the perspective of the 20th century and then the perspective of the 21st century. Keep in mind the French school, the American school, all that is a 20th century
Mm.
debate. It's not a 21st century debate, right? But your approach or your focus is to kind of make the distinction between how it is done in the 20th century and how it is done now. And how it is done now allows you to bring the Eastern school's perspective.
Mm.
So that's how you bring the story together. Don't worry too much about in your video essay. You must have section 1, section 2, section 3 like this. Don't be caught up on that,
All right.
because the instruction says it must include these things. It didn't say you have to follow this structure, right? At
Mm.
the end of the day, how you tell the story about the review of comparative literature in the 21st century is your choice, and your thesis statement should guide you along, not the way I have worded it here.
Okay.
Okay, but yeah, good thoughts. Anything else?
Wait, I check. Okay. And um, in the article that I've chosen, it starts with, again, like I said, it starts with comparative literature and the state of comparative literature. I think in the 20th century, it says that it's dying. That's why the writers of this article wanted to bring the world literature into the comparative literature to kind of revive the comparative literature, so it will be much broader. So I think that one I'm going to put to discuss about that. And after that, should I? Yeah, I think I should look up a bit more article just to support how world literature to support my thesis basically. So yeah, I think
I would say based on the articles that you have right now,
mm-hmm,
how have the authors of this new century, how have the authors defined comparative literature? Even if they don't word it like the comparative literature in our perspective is this, even if they don't word it that way, how do they identify the discipline of comparative literature? Do they look at it as the study of text with another text? Do they look at it as incorporation of other disciplines, other forms of art? That already gives you a telltale sign. Okay, this is what they mean,
mm,
right? And in this definition, they sound more close to the French school, or they sound more close to the Anglo-American school. That's all you have to say. That's the only statement you have to show. You have to say in order to show that you understand how the current perspective is similar or different to the 20th century. That's
uh,
all. That's the only statement you have to make, because that indicates you know the historical development and you know where comparative literature stands today. Okay, that's the first. And then the second thing is, how do they see world literature as facilitating the growth of comparative literature? Because your focus is not world literature, your focus is on the growth of comparative
comparative.
literature. So, how is comparative literature as a discipline growing in the eyes of these scholars? So if the Western scholars like Spivak, like Basnet, are hinting the fact that the discipline appears to be a dying discipline, and largely because of maybe the perspective has changed, or maybe the corpus is limited, or maybe the scholars are no longer multidisciplinary in their multilingual in their approach. How is the Eastern School of Comparative Literature, the Eastern universities, how are they approaching comparative literature to make it thrive? If
Mm,
this side it seems sounds as if it's dying, the Eastern side it sounds as if it's thriving, it's becoming better and stronger. Why is that? Is it just because they are incorporating texts that were once not considered as a canon for world literature? Is it just as simple as that? Are there other arguments? Do we need something called world literature in order for us to facilitate the growth of comparative literature? Or is it as simple as you can study any text that is relevant, as long as there are points of convergence and divergence, as long as there is wealth in the comparison? It's not just a mechanical, this text has this, that text has that, and these are the similarities, these are the differences. You don't want to keep to that level. That's very mechanical. There must be something more in doing text comparatively from one nation state to another. So it's not just about, okay, is text A and B in the canon called world literature? Oh, it's not? Okay, then we cannot incorporate it in the study of comparative literature. It shouldn't be like that, right? So if graphic novel is not in world literature, can you study graphic novel in the discipline of comparative literature? My position is yes,
Mm.
depending on what you want to study it for. Maybe you want to study one graphic novel set in the manga culture in Japan, and you want to study graphic novel maybe in another context, right? And you want to look at the influence of the mangaka, the illustrator, the storyteller. You want to look at the influence of animation and anime into the storytelling. So doesn't matter whether the corpus is in world literature or not. What matters is the definition of comparative literature, the methodology, the way you approach the study of the text across one geographical borders to another. So maybe a graphic novel is not in the national canon. So maybe you have graphic novels, but they are not part of the Malaysian national canon, Malaysian literary canon. Does that mean that you cannot study that graphic novel? It shouldn't be, right? Comparative literature should allow for text to be studied whether or not it is given the status of national literature, because English texts written by Malaysians, they are not national literature, but yet we are incorporating it in our study of in our study of comparative literature. So it doesn't matter whether it's known as national literature, whether it's known as world literature, it doesn't matter. What matters is the definition of comparative literature is kept, that the text is across borders. The format might not be a novel, might not be the genre. The format might be graphic. It might even be digital, right? But the definition of comparative literature, the methodology of comparative literature, this is what matters. But that's my opinion. The assignment asks you to review scholars' opinion, at least 3 scholars' opinion, right? So that's the task. Basically, that's the task. You don't need to you don't need to make the argument too complex by bringing in other variables like world literature and the definition of world literature. Keep it simple,
All right.
right? Yeah. So I think you know what you want to say, and it's just a matter of deciding which bits you want to talk about and which bits you feel this is not relevant for this assignment. This is not relevant. I will put it aside. I think this is the same with all of you,
Yeah, I
everybody,
noticed.
even with Salim just now, and Ruby, and all of you. You are trying to do a lot of things, which is great because it tells me you already have ideas for your second assignment. Even some of you for your third assignment, right? So for 20%, I'm only asking you to do a review
All right.
of what? Of the state of comparative literature in the 21st century. But in order to do a review, you need to know history. You need to know the 20th century context, then compare it to the 21st century context. You need to know how the discipline was defined in the 20th century, how it is defined now in the 21st century by these 3 articles. You need to know the methodology. How was it used in the 20th century? How is it used now by these 3 articles? That's it. Halas, done.
All right.
Yeah?
Clear. So yeah, I think I know what I can exclude from my video essay, because based on what you said, it's actually not supposed to be that hard.
Exactly. That's the point. You all are making it so complicated. Now I'm like, I think you have a very high idea of okay, this assignment must require so much. And then when it's too simple, you're like, can't be, right? It can't be this easy, right?
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
you see, you might think it's easy because you're used to the idea of thinking critically, but the development of your thesis statement, of reading, synthesizing, having an opinion of what you read, those things are not easy. Those
Mm,
things are graduate level skill sets that you are developing and you are further developing and mastering. Okay?
mm. All right. So basically, what I think I'm gonna do now is first, of course, review the three articles based on just like what I wanted, what the author said. Um, I'm not gonna go deeper into like I said just now, search for another text, because I think
No,
I just
don't. Yeah, when you say okay, I'm gonna have to read. I said no, no more reading. You've done enough reading. Now is synthesizing, analyzing what you have read and synthesizing it. This is a higher order thinking skill. So
yeah.
you've read, you've understood. This is the understand lower order. Then you've analyzed, maybe examine a little bit what they're thinking. Now you're synthesizing. So that's the highest that you need to do. You're not producing anything new. Second assignment, third assignment, you get to produce your own original thoughts.
Mm,
That's the highest order, if you like, in terms of thinking skills, you know? So for now, just synthesize and then present it in a form that is engaging to the audience. That's the video essay.
okay, okay. Then
Okay.
do I need to so at the last, can I include my thesis after the review?
No, the thesis must come at the beginning. The thesis is what you are trying to prove in
I
this, or what's the purpose of this presentation. The
Okay,
concluding remark may reiterate that point,
okay.
right? But you need to begin after the background, a short introduction. You need to begin by saying what's the purpose of this video essay. So I would say within the first minute you must say your thesis statement.
All
Yeah.
right.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I think I'm good now. All
If
right.
you need to see me tomorrow again, also can, no problem.
All right. Thank you, doctor.
All right. Take care. Bye bye.